Soulcalibur 6 is a dynamic new 3D fighting game from Bandai Namco that's incredibly fun to play, but for someone who's new to the franchise or to fighting games in general, I wouldn't blame you for not having a clue what's going on screen. In this video I want to give an introduction to all of the rules and mechanics of this game. I will be covering everything in more advanced individual videos later, but for now, if you know what's basically going on, then I'm happy. If you are totally new to Soulcalibur and you don't understand the notation system they use, I have covered that in another video, and I recommend using that or another resource to learn the notations before watching this. But that's enough of all of that, let's get into it. Perhaps the most defining feature of old Soulcalibur games is the freedom of movement when compared to other fighting games, and 6 is a return to form. Stage positioning is perhaps more important in Soulcalibur than in any other fighting game, and it allows you to control this with the ability to move forwards, backwards, to either side, and all of the diagonals. You can dash, you can jump, and all of these options are going to limit what your opponent can hit you with. Let's start with the three most basic attack types, how they interact with each other, and with the movement of the game. High attacks will get blocked by a stand guarding opponent, but will get beat by a duck or by moves that have tech crouch or high crush frames built into them. Crouch guarding will also successfully block lows. Lows are used to force your opponent to duck and open them up. Lows tend to be less rewarding on hit and less favourable on block, and they can also be jumped over, although you can get hit out of the air by highs and mids. Mids will hit people who are crouching even if they're guarding, but they will get blocked by stand guarding. Most of the launchers and the other most dangerous moves in the game are going to be mids. Once you've conditioned your opponent to duck, you can collect the reward. Two much more niche hit properties are special lows, which can be blocked from either standing or crouching and can be jumped over. Generic 2As are a good example of this. And special mids, which can also be blocked from either standing or crouching but can't be jumped over. A good example of this is Taki's 66K. Attack types are also separated into a few other categories, and they are conveniently matched to the buttons you're pressing. In Soulcalibur there is a button used to block, so this covers one of the 4 face buttons. All attacks done using a B in the notations will be a vertical. Vertical attacks come with a lot of their own advantages, but they can be sidestepped. Much like when a high is ducked, if one of your attacks are forced to whiff, you will be very vulnerable, making lateral movement potentially extremely rewarding. But it is hard countered by A attacks, which are all horizontals, and the purpose of these is to catch people stepping. This forms a very basic and incredibly important mix-up in Soulcalibur. Do you counter their horizontals or their verticals? Attacks performed with K are almost always kicks, but the only really universal thing about them is that they are non-weapon attacks. Generic throws are fast highs that are typically very difficult to step. The range on them depends a lot per character, so having good throw range is a real advantage. The animation for all generic grabs is the same, so there's no way to react to the hands like in Tekken. Throw breaking is a true 50-50 between front throws and reverse throws. Front throws are performed with A+G and broken with any attacking button, and generic reverse throws are performed with 4A+G and broken with 4 plus any attack button. If you step to someone's side and grab them, you'll get a different throw animation and sometimes more damage, but there is no difference in how to break this. However, throws in the back are unbreakable, other than for certain characters like Voldo and Astaroth. Unblockables are very niche attacks that usually aren't going to be very useful for you, but can be in certain setups. Typically these are extremely slow and telegraphed attacks that can be beaten in a variety of ways depending on the move. They can be stepped, they can be ducked, they can be interrupted. However, they cannot be beat by guard impact or reversal edge. We'll get into that later. How to get up off of the ground is always one of the scariest parts of playing a new fighting game, but you'll be happy to learn that the Soulcalibur wake up system is relatively simple. By holding G, you will stand up quickly and be blocking immediately. This is probably the most recommended option for beginners, but you do obviously put yourself into a mix-up for the opponent. When you just get knocked down, or when you've already been on the ground and a move hits you, you can press G plus a direction, and you will tech or ukemi in that direction. When you know what you're doing, this can be used to get yourself completely out of their range. You could also choose to stay down and roll on the ground. It's recommended to do this to the left or the right, and is done so with the corresponding buttons. Staying down and doing a grounded roll is surprisingly evasive, and it also limits your opponent to moves that hit on the ground. As always in fighting games, the real key is to mix up your options depending on what you see from your opponent. That was a look at Soulcalibur's takes on generic 3D fighting game mechanics. Now it's time to look at the unique mechanics in Soulcalibur 6. And we'll start off with my very favourite mechanic in Soulcalibur 6, Lethal Hit. Much like in Tekken, when a move achieves a counter hit, they sometimes have different properties. And in a lot of ways, lethal hits in Soulcalibur 6 will remind you of counter hits in Tekken. It even has the extremely exaggerated zoom in animation to let you know you've achieved a lethal hit, but they're not just for counter hits. The conditions that you have to meet to achieve a lethal hit are all over the place for these moves. Some of them lethal hit on whiff punish, some of them lethal hit on counter hit, some of them lethal hit when you land a counter hit when they don't have a bar of meter, some of them lethal hit when they catch step. What lethal hit does is it teaches you exactly how you're supposed to use these moves, so it's an amazing mechanic for beginners looking to learn how to use their moves, and it also just rewards you for the right move choices in the right situations. It also allows for them to create interesting metas around certain moves. For instance, Keelix 4A is an unseeable low, and if he lands 4 of them in a round, it gets a lethal hit giving him a full combo. So you can imagine how scary that character is going to be when he's landed 3 of those on you. Next up is Guts. Guts is basically a mechanic that makes some weaker, lower damage moves scale really harshly when the opponent has a lack of life left. It's essentially a reverse comeback mechanic that forces you to have to kill the opponent with bigger moves, and you can't just take them out with a tiny little low or mid poke mix up. Figuring out which of your moves go past Guts but still have a good risk to reward ratio when your opponent has low life is essential. Soulcalibur also has a very interesting mechanic called air control, which essentially allows you some control over your trajectory while you're in the air. If you're not using air control, there are going to be some ridiculous combos that actually aren't guaranteed that are going to be hitting you, and you can also use air control to escape ring outs in some situations. Which brings me on to my next point. I did mention earlier how important stage positioning is in Soulcalibur 6, and that's because at the wall, or especially at a ring out, characters are extremely dangerous. You essentially get 2 splats out of any wall combo and still get to follow up afterwards. Notice here how Tira uses the same move 3 times. The first 2 achieve a wall splat, and the third one launches for the rest of the combo, and the damage gets silly. And if you manage to carry to the wall with a high damage initial combo, well, you can just imagine what it's going to look like. Ouch. And here are a couple more examples just to get you familiar with the way that this system works. There are also breakable walls in Soulcalibur 6. Moves that will splat will usually break the wall, and you can combo off of this kind of stun as well. Once a wall is broken, a ring out edge is usually exposed, and here is when things get really dangerous. Soulcalibur has an instant death mechanic when you're at the ring edge. If you knock them off, they just die, so it doesn't matter how far behind you are in a round. Some characters specialise in having very strong ring out or even reverse ring out moves, so you'll have to look out for these. They can come from highs, they can come from lows, they can come from throws. Having matchup knowledge when you're near a ring edge is going to be vital. One of the things that makes Soulcalibur 6 really interesting is its universal defensive mechanics. All of the characters have access to guard impact and reversal edge. Let's go into them now. Guard impact, or GI, is an almost instantaneous parry of sorts that works against highs, lows, mids and throws. You execute a GI with 6G. If you successfully time your guard impact with your opponent's move, you will be rewarded with huge frame advantage. There are 3 different levels of GI. Level 2 will give you a quote-unquote guaranteed hit, and level 3 will give you a quote-unquote guaranteed launcher. The level of the GI is decided by the move that you use it against. And I say quote-unquote guaranteed because while you cannot block or act for a certain period of time, during these frames you can re-GI or even reversal edge. And both of these options are very risky, so it becomes a mix-up. The downsides of throwing out a GI in the neutral is that you can whiff it and get punished, and the fact that it gets hard countered by unblockables and especially break attacks, some of which lethal hit GIs for a full launch. This mechanic is something I will absolutely dedicate a full video to soon, so don't worry about it. The next mechanic we're going to cover is totally new to Soulcalibur 6, and it's called Reversal Edge. Reversal Edge is defaulted to R1 on the PlayStation 4 and RB on the Xbox. By holding this button down, you will enter into a state where you will parry all highs, mids, lows and grabs. At any point during the animation you can decide to let go. If you hold onto it for its full duration, it actually becomes an unblockable that doesn't do any damage. The mini clash system that you go into when a reversal edge hits has got a lot of attention, but not enough has gone to the fact that it actually will cause damage and can be used to kill. The guessing game you get put into on hit has got a bit of a bad stigma as just a simple rock paper scissors, but it's much more complicated and seriously more interesting than that. Every character's A, B and K does different things for them, and will also change what they can do from them, depending on whether it's the first round, the second round, whether or not they have meter, where they are on screen, and for some characters like Zasalamel, how many curses he has, for instance. Reversal Edge is a powerful defensive mechanic, but it is by no means broken. It's pretty telegraphed with the red aura around the weapon, and you can sidestep it even after one of your hits gets parried. And just like guard impact, it gets hard countered by unblockables and break attacks. Reversal Edge's application, as well as how all of the clash options work against each other, is a subject that's going to need a full video to itself, so look out for that soon. Now it's time to get on to the hard counter to both of these defensive mechanics, break attacks. Break attacks all have this blue lightning aura that you can see on Grow's weapon here. Typically they are quite slow, sometimes seeable, and they are plus on block. The biggest benefit of break attacks is the fact that they beat reversal edge and guard impact, making them the move that you use when you have the read that your opponent is going to use one of these defensive mechanics. The other big benefit of break attacks though is the fact that they do guard damage. In Soulcalibur 6, when you have a flashing yellow bar, it means that you've taken some guard damage. Next it will go red, which means you're in danger of a guard break. This totally changes how you're going to have to act, because a guard break is going to give them 3 hits on you even when you're blocking. Meaning that one way that you can break down a real turtly defensive player is to optimize your guard damage moves and be ready to break their guard completely and achieve a full combo. It's finally time to talk about the meter mechanics in Soulcalibur 6. And if you're a Tekken player, or just someone who doesn't want to be bothering with complicated meter systems, you're in luck because it's pretty simple. The easiest and most simple way to build meter is with reversal edge. A successful reversal edge on hit is going to give you a quarter of a meter, and each parried move gives you about an eighth. When you're parrying some strings, as you can see here, it's going to give you a ton of meter. You have a maximum of 2 bars of meter and only 2 mechanics that you can use them on. The first of these is Soul Charge. This activates almost instantly and pushes the opponent back on block and on hit, making it a very effective get off me tool. It also freezes the clock, gives chip damage on block to all of your moves, and it also gives you new moves and new extensions to your strings for a temporary period of time, making you extremely powerful and allowing for big comebacks. Note that Soul Charge activations are actually plus on block, but because of the pushback this is only relevant near the wall or a ring out. The other use of meter is Critical Edge. This is Soulcalibur's version of a super. You're going to get a ton of damage out of this and a really cool animation. Also, if it kills, your character's going to do a cheeky pop-off. When you have a bar of meter, you can use Critical Edge with R2 on the PlayStation or RT on the Xbox, and every character's is different, so there's not much more I can say about them just now. And that concludes my beginner's introduction to Soulcalibur 6. Once again, I will be covering everything in this video in more detail down the line, so if I helped you in this video and that is something that appeals to you, please like, comment and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I'll see you all soon.